Let me get this going. There we go. Technical difficulties. I know I've said this before, like if you've been around here, and you'd expect me to say it because I'm the preacher, but I really don't understand why anyone wouldn't want to follow Jesus. Like if you really meet the real Jesus. I mean, I get why, like some people might not want to follow the version of Christianity or like that caricature of Jesus that you might see on TV or Saturday Night Live or something. I mean, I wouldn't want to follow that either. Or maybe the version you grew up with or what we've turned Jesus into sometimes. I get all that, but I don't know why everybody wouldn't want the original version, like that original irresistible version of Jesus and Christianity to be true. I just don't know, because there's a big difference between, like, I don't believe it's true, because some people, maybe they just have some big questions they still need answered, or yeah, I need more information or evidence. Sometimes, there's things like that. I get that. I get when we wrestle with big questions. But there's a big difference between I don't believe it's true and I don't want it to be true. And it's just hard for me to understand when people are confronted with the original version of Jesus and the claims that he actually made about himself and the life that he lived and the life that he encouraged us to live. I don't understand why people wouldn't at least want that to be true, because it represents so much about what we want as people, even in our society, to be true. I mean, even if you never arrive at a place intellectually where you could believe it's all true, I don't get why anybody wouldn't want it to be true. And part of it, I think, is what a guy named Blaise Pascal, maybe you studied him in history. He was a 17th century mathematician, a philosopher. He was actually homeschooled, I found out too, so there's a plug for any of y'all homeschool families, right? Rock on, Pascal was with you. But he wrote something that I think is worth chewing on. He said this. He said, people almost invariably arrive at their beliefs not on the basis of proof, but on the basis of what they find attractive. And what he's getting at there is something that we talked about before called confirmation bias, where, in other words, when we find something attractive, when something is appealing to us, we'll go along with it whether or not we believe it or not. We like to be in groups. We like to be in the club. And so like for example, I could say silver trucks are superior to other trucks. Silver trucks are better than blue trucks. You can probably guess why I would say that, right? I have a silver truck. So I could give you 10 reasons why silver trucks are better than black trucks or blue trucks or red trucks. My beliefs are superior, therefore, to your beliefs about trucks. Why? Not because my beliefs are truer, but because I find it more attractive. It's more appealing to me. So I'll make reasons why my beliefs are right. Now understand, okay, neither Pascal nor I am trying to convince you or argue that just because something is attractive and appealing, it's true. That's not what I'm saying. That's not the point. Like as if Jesus were more attractive, then more people would find him true. No, my point is this, okay? Christianity, our faith, in its earliest original form, was so extraordinarily attractive. I mean, people by the multitudes. I don't understand why people in our day and time wouldn't want it to at least be true, even if intellectually they can't actually get there. Because when Jesus first came on the scene, people were so attracted to him. They weren't forced to follow Jesus, right? People weren't guilted into following Jesus or manipulated into following Jesus. If anything, there was a lot of good reasons not to follow Jesus back then. But people by the multitudes were actually attracted to Jesus. Early Christianity was attractive, so attractive that eventually, you think about it in our day, it shaped, not just influenced, but it literally shaped Western culture. Whether you believe in it or not, it shaped your life. And the thing that made Jesus, the thing that made Christianity so attractive, at least the original version, is a single word that we're going to talk about over the next few weeks. It's the word that makes me want to believe it's true. It's a word I want us to think about this Christmas season, but perhaps it's a word that wasn't a part of the appeal to you. And the word is grace. Now think about grace. Okay, grace is something that we all find attractive. You might not call it this, but grace, this is what you crave the most when you feel guilty about something, right? Like you remember coming home late as a young person, your parents are sitting at home, right? This wasn't just me, I'm sure. But like they got the stuff out on the table. You can't deny it. They found it in your room. They know it's yours. You know it's yours. There's no excuses. There's no loopholes. There's no saying, hey, that's my sister's or whatever. You got the wrong guy. There's no point in saying anything about that. We found it in your room. I mean, you're just busted. And in that moment, you're thinking about all the things they could take away, all the things they should take away, right? I own it. In that moment, you don't want your parents to be fair. You don't want justice. What do you want? I want grace, right? Throwing myself on your mercy. What do I want? I want grace. Or you come home late and it's your spouse waiting up. Or it's your kids waiting up for you. Or it's that time when your boss calls you in and boom, he just kind of lays it out there. She lays it out there and you realize there's no point making excuses. You just got to own this and you made it. There's no loopholes. There's no fingers to point at anybody else, right? This is mine. And in that moment, even if you don't think about the word, what you're really looking for is grace, right? You are looking for someone to give you something that you know you don't deserve, but you desperately want, right? And we all know we don't deserve this. And at the same time, okay, there can be this tension to grace when we're confronted with the guilt of other people. It's one thing when I know I own it, but when someone does something to hurt me or someone does something to hurt someone I love, there's this tension to grace, because when I'm on the receiving end of grace, grace can be extraordinarily refreshing, right? But when grace is expected of me to give to someone else, it becomes extraordinarily frustrating, really disturbing kind of a thing. But grace really is, as we're going to see today and in the next few weeks, it's the unsettling universal fix for just about everything. Now I know that if you grew up in church, though, you might have learned a definition of grace, and you might have learned this definition we're going to use. This is going to be our working definition of grace. Grace is really unmerited favor. It's like someone leaning in your direction when you know they should be leaning away. Or, it's someone that you know you should be reaching out to because maybe you did something to hurt them. And yet, before you do that, they actually initiate the reconciliation with you. It's grace. But grace is also weird. It's strange. Because grace can kind of be like trying to plan your own surprise party. Because if you plan your own surprise party, right, then there's no surprise. And grace is like that in the moment that you start to believe you deserve grace. You take away the chance for grace to be shown to you. You can't receive grace if you feel like you deserve grace. You can ask for grace, right? You can beg for grace, but the moment you think you deserve it, it's no longer grace. It's something different. And here's the twist of the whole deal, okay? You can't receive grace for what it really is until we admit we don't deserve it. And it can only be experienced within the context of a relationship. Grace is purely relational. It has to be given by someone. It's always tied to a relationship. And in our relationship with God, like if we looked at our relationship on a spreadsheet, our side of the ledger is the negative side. But that's what makes this message of Jesus and true Christianity so unique, so attractive. Because this is the reason that even if you never get to a place intellectually where you can believe all of this, this is why everybody, I think, should at least want it to be true. Because you can't understand grace apart from a relationship. I mean, that's why God had to show up. This is why we celebrate Christmas. We would have never known anything about the grace of God without the presence of God. For God's grace to be known, there had to be a relationship. There had to be a person. I mean, it had to be personal. And He initiated that with us. That's the message of Christmas. And so now the gospel writer John, he wrote his gospel. He also wrote 3 other letters in our New Testament that were not creatively called 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. Go figure. But John was a disciple of Jesus who saw like the entire thing. John was up close and personal. And John lived to be a really, really old man. Like most people believe he actually outlived all the others, like Peter and Andrew and James. He outlived all of them. He probably outlived all of his friends. And in his later years, the Christians that were still around him started saying, hey, John, man, we got to hear your story, right? You were there, and you're getting old. We don't know how long you're going to be with us. We got to know your story. Tell us your story. So as an old man, he sits down and he decides to write his account. And I can just imagine as he begins, he's kind of trying to figure this out. Like, I saw so much stuff. This is such an epic tale. Where do you even begin to try to tell such an unbelievable story, something people will believe is true, that is so unbelievable? Like, how do I tell the account of something so fantastic it'll be hard for people to believe? How do I tell it in a way that people will actually believe it? And so John begins his account of the life of Jesus like this, and he goes right to the core of what Christmas is about, and right to the core of what grace is about. He says this in John 1:14. He says, the Word, and the Greek word there is logos, the Word, became flesh. And that word, capitalized word, is there because it's not talking about a something, it's talking about a someone. And this was maybe John's way of saying, I don't even completely know how to describe what it is I'm going to try to write about in detail. All I know is that God inhabited a body, and God came to earth, and I know that's hard to believe, but he's like, I'm just getting started. He goes on, verse 14, God became flesh and made his dwelling among us. And then he says, we have seen his glory. And when he says we here, he's not talking about you and me, we, right? He's not talking about we. He's talking about him, we. Okay? Like, he's making the point, look, this isn't something that I just heard about or I read about and I'm just kind of passing it along to you. No, we is in Peter and Andrew and James and me and the others and dozens and even hundreds of other men and women that you could even go talk to still. We have seen what I'm talking about. This is why I'm writing this, so that you'll know, he says, we've seen this. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father. And then here's this kind of tagline that he goes back to throughout his entire gospel. He says, full of grace and truth. And he's not just talking about like a balance of grace and truth, because that's kind of what we try to do with it, right? We try to mix a little of both, not a balance of, because when you try to balance grace and truth, you end up losing a little bit of grace and losing a little bit of truth to try to get them to work together. Jesus was full on grace and full on truth. Like, Jesus brought a full dose of both. And this is so powerful because you think about this in our lives. Most of the time, we tend to be on one side or the other. Like some of y'all are truth people, right? Like, I just tell it like it is. I'm just being honest, right? I'm just going to tell you the truth, right? And you don't care who you hurt, but I'm just being honest. And then there's grace people who are maybe too nice sometimes, and you don't assert yourself when you should. You don't say what you need to say. But we tend to kind of fall into these camps, and or some of you, maybe you grew up in truth churches. Or maybe you grew up in grace churches. But this is why I think sometimes this is why we get married, because you need really, for a good marriage, you need a grace person and a truth person. Because if you're both truth or you're both grace, your kids end up being crazy. This is why some of y'all might be crazy, because both of your parents were all grace or all truth. We need a little bit of both. We need a little bit of grace, a little bit of truth. Jesus shows up, right? And he's full on grace and he's full on truth. Jesus never once watered down the truth. He never turned down the grace either. It's amazing. I mean, Jesus called sin, sin. He called sinners, sinners. But at the same time, he loved the sinners. And he wasn't afraid to be seen with the sinners. He gave his life for the sinners and paid for their sin. He was all grace and all truth all the time. And John saw this with the people. And it's what led John, as this old man, to finally write these words that would change the way almost everybody in the world views God. Like, if you're a good parent or you had good parents, you know this, okay? Love is all grace, all truth, all the time. And John remembered, I think when he was writing this, he remembered this one particular awkward afternoon where he and his buddies, the disciples, and Jesus were going down what was probably like a toll road, and they came to a place where the tax collector sat to take the fees to pass. And so after they did their business with the tax collector, Jesus leans into this tax collector, and whose name you might recall if you heard of Matthew. That's who this guy was. And Jesus says, hey, I want you to follow me. All right, now picture this. Because all the other apostles and followers that were with him are like, no, you're not. Not this guy, right? No way. He's a traitor. Jesus, you know these tax collectors, right? They're one of our own. They steal money from us. Like his own family wouldn't even invite him over for the holidays. What do you mean, follow me? He's not going to be a part of our posse. No. He's like, no, Matthew, I want you to follow me. And there's no indication that Matthew even decided not to be a tax collector anymore. He got up, maybe he asked one of his subordinates to kind of take over what he was doing, and he decides to follow Jesus. And Peter and the guys are just kind of like stepping back, like, no way. No, we're Jesus, you're not even going to get anybody else to follow you. You keep inviting guys like this to be a part of who we are, right? If that's the kind of people you keep inviting. But Matthew says, okay, I'll follow you. Where are we going? And then Jesus, if he hadn't already offended some folks, he says something now that offended everybody that was following him that could hear him say this. He says, Matthew, we're going to your house. And Peter's like, no, sir, I'm not going to his house. Jesus is like, yes, you are, because you're following me too, and we're all going to Matthew's house. Well, wait a minute, wait. Okay, he's a tax collector. Like Jesus, you haven't even called him out on his sin yet, right? You haven't even told him to repent and change his ways. And all of a sudden, you're asking us to go to his house. You haven't asked him to give the money back that he stole or anything like that. You're just going to ask him to follow us just like that. And then we're going to go to his house? Yeah. I mean, it's incredibly uncomfortable for these guys. But they all go to his house. And then to make things even worse, Matthew invites a bunch of his tax collecting buddies to come over to the house as well, because Jesus was like, hey, I want to have dinner with you and your friends. And so Matthew's thinking, okay, but you're not going to like my friends because my friends are nothing like you, and you're nothing like my friends, and I don't even think my friends are going to like you, and I know you're not going to like my friends. But he invites his friends over, and all his friends are like all the wrong people. And then when, you can see Peter's sitting over there, he's all mad and upset, and Andrew's probably in the back over there all pouting and upset as well. Like, this is awkward. It's not a really good party. I tried to think about, like, how this would be for y'all. If, let's say you're at your office Christmas party, right? Or maybe just out with friends at a restaurant or something, whatever, at Christmas. And this is the point in which everybody has just drank a little too much, right? It's not a full-on house brawl yet, but everybody's just a little... and things are just starting to loosen up, and then I walk in. Now, why are you laughing? I don't know why that's funny. But yeah, it's like party pooper. I mean, we like you on Sunday, Dennis, but not Friday night, right? Like, how long are you and Kimberly going to be hanging out? I don't know. They'll be gone soon. So as soon as we leave, it's like, okay, let's get back to the party. That's kind of how it was, I think, in this party with Matthew, because there's Jesus the rabbi. He's in the house of Matthew the tax collector. All his party and tax collector friends are there. And the whole thing is just ridiculously disturbing because that's the nature of grace. It's the universal fix just about everything, but it can be so disturbing. And when the Pharisees, okay, they're always lurking in the shadows somewhere, it seems like. They're the protectors of truth. They're like the self-proclaimed flag-throwing, sin referees. They walk around, like this probably with their hands up because they don't want to get dirty. They don't want to touch anybody that's dirty or get up close to anything. They step around things. They believe they represent God to the people. But most of the people are kind of like, if God is anything like y'all, then I'm not even sure we want to go to heaven to be with God. I mean, that was kind of this tension that the most of the people had with the Pharisees in the first century. But when the Pharisees hear about this, okay, because they weren't invited to this party and they wouldn't have shown up anyway. But when they heard about it, because they're important, they show up outside. They're not going in. But they send a message into the house for the disciples. Now here's how Matthew records it. He remembers it. He said, when they saw this, they asked his disciples, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? Like all snooty like, right? Like if he's a rabbi, if he's a representative of God, he should not be eating with those people. He should be eating with us. And I can imagine whoever delivered this message probably delivered it really loudly so that Matthew and all his friends could hear it and be shamed by it, right? Like my friends, the leaders from the temple have come, and Jesus, they want to know, why are you eating with such riffraff? Like, why are you here with tax collectors and sinners? And then I can see Jesus answering equally as loud. I mean, he says this, verse 12. On hearing this, Jesus said, don't call Matthew and his friends sinners. That might hurt their feelings. And they could raise your taxes. Right? No, Jesus is brilliant. He was so awesome. Like, what Jesus actually does is he makes an awkward situation even more awkward. He does this grace truth thing that he would do, and he's at Matthew's house, right? And he says out loud, with almost everyone certainly leaning in to hear how Jesus is going to answer the Pharisees. Jesus actually said, okay, on hearing this, Jesus said, he's like, tell the guys outside, it's not the healthy that need a doctor, but the sick. And they're thinking about it, but I'm sure Matthew's probably back there thinking too, like, wait, Jesus, I mean, like, you're my guest, and I invited you over here, and that's cool and everything, but are you calling me sick, like in my own house? To which Jesus would have said, yeah, you're stealing from people. I mean, you're sick, but I still want you to follow me. I mean, it's kind of like, what? Yeah, Matthew, you're sick. That's why I'm here. All your friends, right? The tax collectors and sinners. And so it's like sinners have their own category because they don't even want to be associated with you tax collectors, right? You guys are the worst of the worst. So thanks for inviting me over. Would you follow me? It's just incredibly disturbing. It's like, no, wait. If you want someone to follow you, you should ask people who are like you to follow you. You've asked someone who is nothing like you to follow you. Like Jesus, you're messing up all the groupings. To which I think Jesus would just kind of smile. And he's not even done. He's like, oh yeah, by the way, tell the Pharisees outside this too for me, right? And this was so offensive to them. Verse 13, he says, but go and learn what this means. And before he even says anything, it's like whenever you tell the smartest person in the room to go and learn something, you've offended them. It's kind of like, you need to go and learn something that I know that you don't know. And everybody in the room knew this was such a dig at these educated teachers of the law. Go learn what this means, he says. And then he quotes from their own scripture, the law and the prophets, that they're supposed to be the experts in. He says, but go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. And he just says the word. I'm not afraid to call a sinner a sinner. I know what they are. They know they're sinners. But neither am I afraid to go to their house for dinner. It's a nice little ditty rhyme. In fact, here, repeat this with me, okay? I'm not afraid to call a sinner, and I'm not afraid to go to their for. There you go. You remember, that's kind of how Jesus put it. So now when I show up to your party at your house, I expect you to be welcoming to me as well. Like y'all just missed. I totally offended you right there. Like Dennis trying to be Jesus or something. Anyway, okay, so like not long after this episode, and this is one of these events, you've probably heard this before, even if you didn't grow up in church, but it's almost impossible for me to even convey the emotion behind it. It's hard for me to get my mind wrapped around this completely. But one day after this, Jesus shows up on the temple steps, the Temple Mount. And this was like the holiest place on the planet. For the way we think, like us Westerners, there's no way to even ascribe completely, I think, the value to the temple that these first century Jews gave it. And so Jesus is there at the temple, like right over there, you could see the altar where they perform the sacrifices, right? And right back there's the Holy of Holies where the Word of God is kept. I mean, he's right there. And we're here sitting on the steps of the Temple Mount, and Jesus is there teaching, which always made everybody uncomfortable, a little bit nervous. And he's teaching when right in the middle of it, they drag a woman up to him, and they just throw her down at his feet. And apparently, they probably held her all night just waiting for this moment. Like, let's wait for Jesus to get on the steps so we can bring her to him, and we'll see how he handles this. And so they drag this woman up, and they throw her down, and they say, Jesus, this woman was caught in adultery. Which begs the question where the dude's at too, because it takes two, right? But they bring her in, and they're like, the law, which is right over there, if you don't believe us, we can get it and bring it out and read it to you, right? The law says that she must die. She must be stoned to death. And Jesus is so brilliant. I mean, this is why I don't think people just made these stories up later on. This is genius. Jesus says, all right, well, you're the experts in the law, right? Stone her. Do you, right? He knows. He calls their bluff because he knows they're not going to stone her right there on the steps of the temple. But imagine her, okay? She's terrified. This is Jesus. Wait a minute. Where's all the compassion? Like, where's the love? What? She's terrified. And then Jesus does his Jesus thing. He says, all right, you guys get started, do your thing. But here's one thing, all right? How about we start with the person who doesn't have any sin, right? You go first. And then it says he just kind of kneels down and starts kind of writing in the sand a little bit. And scholars for years have always wondered about what Jesus was writing. We really don't know. Maybe he was kind of writing like, it takes one to know one or something like that in Aramaic. Because they don't say anything, but one by one, they all just kind of leave. They don't even have any answer for this. They don't have anything to say. And then, okay, after they're gone, Jesus just spoils the moment almost. He leans down and he looks into this woman's eyes. And he simply says to her, go now and leave your life of sin. He just says the word, right? Just go now and leave your life of sin. Not, hey, you're fine, they're gone, right? You had a tough upbringing. I know your mom. I know everything. Just, you're going to be okay. No, just leave your life of sin. It's grace and truth. Like, you're guilty. You know you're guilty. But I don't condemn you. Like, wait, what? Wait. If I'm guilty, you're supposed to condemn me. No, I know you're guilty. But I don't condemn you. Wait, if I'm innocent, okay, you don't condemn me. If I'm guilty, you condemn me. How can I be guilty and you don't condemn me? I mean, isn't it like either or? Isn't it always the other way around? No, it used to be, but see, in this moment, for your benefit, right? For your benefit, grace has touched down. There is a new lawgiver now. There is a new covenant maker. There's a new representative of God the Father. And he was all grace, all truth, all the time after time, over and over and over and over and over again. I mean, this is to me why, even if you can't get completely to a place where you understand it all intellectually, you should want this to be true. Because over and over and over again, Jesus leaned in towards the guilty. Over and over again, Jesus leans in and even runs to the irreligious. Over and over, he leaned into people who hadn't acknowledged their sin, hadn't initiated a relationship with him, but yet he still says, follow me. Just follow me. And then John, he was there at the very end, right at the crucifixion. John was there. And when Jesus was crucified, John witnessed it, the ultimate expression of grace right there on the cross. And this was the most disturbing expression of grace of all of it, maybe. This was the moment that put amazing in grace. Because John tells us, if you remember, there were two criminals crucified with Jesus on his side, two other men. And they were led out with him, it says, to be executed. And when you read this account, there's not a lot of detail about it because there really wasn't a need for anybody that was reading this for the first time. They knew all about crucifixions. They'd seen crucifixions. They'd smelled crucifixions. They didn't need to know anything about the horrors. But in the text, there's one of these phrases that you might easily just kind of read right by it. But it's really horrifying. This is disgusting, and yet it's me, because this is what we do. It's a detail that kind of reminds me, okay, John's not just writing some fantasy that this is once upon a time in a village far, far away. No, this is what he saw. This is what he experienced. Because John writes there's a crowd there, and they watched, and the rulers were there, and they were even mocking Jesus. They said to each other, like, he saved others, why can't he save himself? If he's the Messiah, if he's the Son of God, come down off that cross. Chosen one, right? But they understood. This is what Jesus claimed about himself. And then one of the criminals who hung there, he gets in on it. He starts hurling insults at Jesus. It's like he was going to take his vengeance. He's going to take his anger all the way to death with him. But the other criminal rebuked him. And he says the most interesting thing. And Luke records it for us. He says to the other criminal, "Don't you fear God," he said, "since you are under the same sentence." Then he says this, though, "We are punished," and this is amazing, "we are punished justly, for we're getting what our deeds deserve. I own it. You should own it. but this man has done nothing wrong. In other words, it's like, okay, if the kingdom of heaven is reserved for righteous people, if the kingdom of heaven is reserved for people who get it right every time, his acknowledgement was, okay, we have no hope. We have no chance. We're getting what we deserve. His only hope was what he deserved the least, something he had probably extended very little of to other people during his life. So it's like in this act of desperation, he says, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Wherever it is you're going, I'm not going there, but wherever you're going, remember me. To which the people in the audience, they could overhear these whispers going back and forth from the cross. And they had to think, why? Why? Like, why? What a ridiculous thing to ask for now. Like, is he repenting? Repenting from a cross is meaningless, right? I mean, you trying to rededicate, like from now on. Like from now on for you is like moments. There's no point in repenting and rededicating and giving yourself to God now. There's no way to make restitution. There's no way to do anything good for anyone. For the rest of your meaningless life, there's nothing to offer. You have no bargaining power with man or with God. And in this moment, Jesus disturbs everything. I mean, Jesus brings up that unsettling thing that his followers were so accustomed to, but never did they imagine in their wildest dreams that he would take it to this extreme. He interferes with the fairness, the justice that this man deserves. And he does the unthinkable. Jesus answers him. Now, why is that unthinkable? Well, let me ask you this question, okay? Does God hear the prayers of sinners? I mean, it's really the only prayers he does hear, right? Yeah, Jesus answered him. But why even acknowledge him? Every word Jesus said cost him dearly. Every breath at this point was combined with excruciating pain. But he answers anyway. And you know why? I think this is so cool. You know why? Because that's what grace does. Grace answers anyway. And Jesus answered him and said, truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. Now get this, God in a body offering a man who had done nothing good and had nothing good to offer, gives him this promise. Where I'm going, you're going. He grants this last minute request. He grants a request that essentially says, like, you're going to have the same eternity that John's going to have. You're going to have the same eternity that Peter and Andrew are going to have. These guys that have been following me for 3.5 years or more. And why? Like, why would Jesus do this? So unfair. I think it was mind-boggling to John and to Peter and to the others, that the other guys in the crowd. The woman in adultery, okay, that's one thing, right? Asking Matthew, a tax collector, to follow, that's one thing. This is a whole nother thing. And why? And here's what I want you to hear. If you don't hear anything else I say today. Because just like life, okay, grace is not fair. It's better than fair. It's like disturbingly better than fair. And Jesus would continue this even after his resurrection. This is unbelievable if you know the narrative. After the resurrection, Jesus pulls Peter aside, and Peter was just racked with guilt and shame because he denied Jesus, if you remember, before the crucifixion, denied him 3 times, once to a little schoolgirl. But Jesus pulls him aside and says, Peter, I'm going to put you in charge of the whole thing from here on out. But nobody was less deserving, less trustworthy. But very soon after that, maybe even just a few months or a year after that, Jesus recruits another guy, Saul of Tarsus. Remember him? He was trying to dismantle, destroy the whole Jesus movement. And yet Jesus recruits Saul and calls him Paul, and we know him as the Apostle Paul, and he allows Paul to write like half of our New Testament. Why? I mean, to me, these are more examples of Jesus just saying over and over and over and over again that I'm a person that brings grace and truth. Not in half measure, not a mix of, not a blend of, full on grace, full on truth, all the time. And now your pushback on this, okay? I get this. And we're going to talk more about this next week, so don't miss next week. But this is why this is so disturbing to all of us, I think, especially as church folk. Because the pushback on this is simple. It's like those are cool stories, Dennis, and I get it. And you made it all emotional, and I get all that. But hey, I mean, like, wasn't Jesus concerned about justice? Wasn't Jesus concerned about right and wrong and black and white? I mean, there's just some things that are wrong, right? Wasn't Jesus concerned about consequences, choices? Yeah, I mean, Jesus knew better than anybody about justice and consequences. You know what he knew? He knew that God's justice would crush us. That's what he knew. Because all have sinned, and nobody can pay God back. And we know this. And Jesus wasn't unaware of consequences and choices either. He knew better than anybody that the consequences of sin, were already crushing us. Because whether you believe in the New Testament sin or not, regardless of how you view the world, listen, every single sin, whatever you call it, every mistake, every oops, whatever, and if you're an adult, you've experienced this. Maybe you don't use these words, but every single sin comes prepackaged with a gotcha. Because we all know what guilt feels like, right? Most of us know what shame feels like. What is that? We know that. Every sin comes prepackaged with this gotcha, so Jesus in his grace and his mercy came at Christmas to get you from the gotcha, right? I mean, this is why I don't know why everybody wouldn't want it to be true. Because when grace is on full display, when you see it, and if you would just open yourself to even consider the possibility that you have a heavenly Father. And you don't even have to admit this to anybody yet if you're still struggling with this. But if you would just allow yourself to at least consider the possibility that there's a creator God who has created you with a unique purpose and has invited you to connect with him in a relationship, to communicate with him as if he is a perfect heavenly Father and that he is known for his grace and truth that dropped in the person of Jesus. I mean, why wouldn't we want this to be true? To close this morning, I'm going to invite Barrett and Sam. I want them to come up, and I asked them to close with a song this morning. And it's a song, maybe you've heard it before. It's a prayer. And so I want you to just kind of engage with it wherever you're at. If you know the song, feel free to sing it along with them. Maybe you're still kicking back against some of this. Maybe you're not too sure about it. I'd invite you to just wrestle with the lyrics, the words of this song then. Just kind of let them roll around a little bit. Because I believe people want this to be true before they even believe it's true. And I believe that the ultimate representation of all of this is displayed in a person, in Jesus. And if you'll just give yourself permission to look at the real Jesus. I mean, the good news is summarized in a word, and it's our word. It's the word grace. And grace is an invitation, right? It's an invitation to follow. It's an invitation very much just like the invitation that Jesus extended to Matthew. It's the invitation. The invitation goes like this for you, right? It's an invitation that says, I know all about you. I know all the good. I know all the bad. I know everything that you hope nobody finds out about you. I know all of that. It's no surprise to me. And I want you to follow me. But be warned. If you follow me, I will lead you away from your sin. And no, I haven't forgotten all that you've done. It's better than that. I remember all of it, and I love you anyway. Now, come and follow me. Would you just pray, Father, I just pray this morning that wherever we're at with this invitation, that you would just speak in a way that we know that you're talking to us right now. Just speak to our hearts, Father. Thank you for your grace. In Jesus' name.
When the sea is calm and all is right, when I feel your favor flood my life, even in the good I'll follow you. Even in the good I'll follow you. When the boat is tossed upon the waves, when I wonder if you'll keep me safe, even in the storms I'll follow. Even in the storms I'll follow you. I believe everything that you say you are. I believe and I have seen your unchanging heart in the good things and in the hardest part. I believe and I will follow you. I believe and I will follow you. When I see the wicked prospering, when I feel I have no voice to sing, even in the want I'll follow you. Even in the want I'll follow you. I believe everything that you say you are. I believe and I have seen your unchanging heart in the good things and in the hardest part. I believe and I will follow you. I believe and I will follow you. When I find myself so far from home, and you lead me somewhere that I don't wanna go, even in my death I'll follow you. Even in my death I'll follow you. When I come to end this race I've run, and I receive the prize that Christ has won, I will be with you in paradise. I will be with you in paradise. Oh, I believe everything that you say you are. I believe and I have seen your unchanging heart in the good things and in the hardest part. I believe and I will follow you. I believe and I will follow you. I believe and I will follow you. I believe and I will follow you.
Thank you guys for being here today. All right, go out of here and live a bigger story. Let that lead you back here next week. Bring somebody with you. Have a great week. You're dismissed.